I say, look out, that's a bomb you've got there. It's dangerous to play about with those things. Better put it down and inform the police.
Not likely. I'm going to take it home as a souvenir. Must be a dud or it had gone off a long time ago. Anyway, I can take things up when I get home.
So if you see any strange metal object lying about, don't touch it.
War has always been about more than the battlefield. In the great conflict at the heart of the 20th century, the Second World War, those who were not in uniform, whose countries had not been invaded, still found themselves in danger, and their lives totally changed. This is the story of those who lived in the shadow of World War II.
The storm gathers. Its shadow envelops mankind. It is the eve of cataclysm. History is being written.
Though their countries were at war, for many millions of people there was no sound of the guns, no sight of the marching troops, of an occupying invader. But what there was, for every nation involved in the Second World War, and altering daily life in the most profound ways, was the ever-present threat of enemy action, from the sea or from the sky. What changed the lives of those living in the shadow of the war more than anything else was the effort to stay safe.
While these hours of destiny draw out, the citizen makes his preparations. Windows are darkened to render blackouts complete. Anderson shelters are stocked so that there may be nothing to think of at the last moment. The wise man carries buckets for water into his home as protection against the risk of incendiary bombs. First aid kit is assembled and gone over, and gas masks are tested once again to make sure they're in good order.
It was in September '39. I was staying with an uncle and aunt of mine in Birmingham, and I can remember sitting in the yard at the back, and my family had a radio. Radios were still a rarity, and all the neighbours came to hear Mr. Chamberlain's speech. And I can remember that speech as if it was yesterday.
By the time British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain told his countrymen that they were at war with Germany on the morning of the 3rd of September 1939, preparations to protect the citizens on the home front were well advanced. Chamberlain's notorious abandonment of Czechoslovakia to German ambition bemoaned the fact that Britain was digging trenches because of a dispute in a far-off country. That was in 1938. A year earlier, 1937, the first gas mask depot had been opened in London, and the air raid sirens tested for the first time. Civil Defence Forces, the Home Guard, were formed, part of the preparation to meet an invasion.
That you're taking your first pressure and you're going to apply the second pressure by a gentle movement from the first finger.
They were not the blundering buffoons that modern comedy has painted them to be.
In fact, the Home Guard is clearly becoming a very formidable force. And can they march? Take a look at this march past. Such is the strangeness of human nature that the Home Guard, who are not really required to do much drilling, prove almost as smart as the regulars.
Well drilled, if poorly equipped, their ranks were swollen by veterans of the First World War. And in war games devised to train the new recruits, Home Guard units frequently proved to be the better soldiers.
The principle at Osterley Park is to turn men into first-class irregulars rather than imitation barrack square soldiers. Surely more schools of this kind are needed. We all want to know the best way of handing out cocktails to unwelcome guests.
Other civilians in uniform played vital roles in dealing with the dangers of war. Today, we would call them first responders. The great danger, whose threat was never doubted, and which the greatest disruptions to daily life were designed to counter, was not the landing of a foreign army, though coast watchers kept watch on the horizon for an invasion fleet that never came. It was the expectation of gas attacks and aerial bombardment that threw the heaviest shadow over the home front. And the bombers did come.
We stood outside the shelter looking at the city burning. But I don't ever remember it being explained to me. And when we went up to my bedroom, we could look out, and scared the hell out of me.
The belief was universal that a civilian population, relentlessly attacked by bombers, would crumble. Morale would collapse. Support for the war would collapse. Bombing would be a war-winning strategy. The Japanese has tested it on Shanghai, the Germans and Italians in the Spanish Civil War.
Key writers had understood that. H.G. Wells back in 1908 wrote about airships bombing London, even New York, turning New York into a crimson furnace, with people kind of scurrying and running everywhere.
Wells developed his apocalyptic visions still further, and his screenplay for 1936, Things to Come, based on his own story, put civilians in the front line of warfare.
Now, this film is fascinating in many ways because he depicts a Blitz scene in it, and it doesn't hold back. It's hugely terrifying for those watching it in 1936. It has a city that is under intense bombardment, so everyday things like the cinema that people are in, the cinema is being bombed to smithereens in this film.
Knowing that poison gas had been used by the British in the Middle East and the Italians in Libya and Ethiopia, Wells's vision seemed anything but far-fetched.
The latest in uniforms for wedding ceremonies are, of course, decontamination suits. It had to happen, I suppose. Crossed shovels form an arch for this ingenious pair of lovebirds undertaking the first hazard of matrimony. You may think air raid precautions rather a grim subject for lightheartedness, but it's a British characteristic to laugh at trouble. Mr. and Mrs. Clements of Gillingham start married life with a good blowing up and go off to their honeymoon in a gas school omnibus.
Gas masks would be issued to everyone, and children were tempted with novelty decorations.
I was taken with all my class in my primary school, my first school I should say, to a place where we were all fitted out with gas masks.
Notices appeared urging men, women and children to attend at certain addresses to have gas masks fitted. You and I, who responded to this request, found ARP volunteers administering to our needs with an efficiency as obliging as the barbers and gentler than the dentists.
I always remember that. And I was very, very annoyed because I didn't get a Mickey Mouse when I was too old. I was a year too old to get a Mickey Mouse.
I do remember my sister, who was a baby during the war, and we had a Mickey Mouse gas mask for her. And it was huge. They used to put the babies inside that. And it was coloured, I think, to, maybe so that the children wouldn't be frightened. A huge thing. Mum used to say it's a nuisance, it took up so much room.
When war came, the life of cities everywhere was at once changed. There were blackouts and air raid drills, gas masks and sandbags virtually from the Atlantic to the Caucasus. People knew what this war would mean.
Civilians had to be involved. They needed to feel that they were participating. The feeling that you're actually in this war to win it, that you're fighting, doing your little bit, is a very important part of civilian participation.
And in the front line, in every country, and throughout the devastation of area bombing, were the first responders.
Well, I was call-up age. I volunteered as an ambulance driver. It was a very demanding job, and you had to report on every siren. You got into the habit of getting dressed before the alarms had finished, and you had to walk down to the depot to get hold of the ambulances and get your orders. So that was usually the early hours of the morning. So it was a fairly demanding situation.
The police, the ambulance services, and perhaps above all, the fire brigades in countless cities that came under bomber attack performed heroically, sticking to their tasks as their cities went up in flames around them.
London. Mr. Attlee, Lord Privy Seal, has just inspected all sections of the capital's fire services. He visited their headquarters, meeting many of the personnel, and on the banks of the Serpentine, firefighters put on a special show for his benefit. 200 pumps were in action. It's estimated that water was pumped at the rate of over 67,000 gallons a minute.
If living in the shadow of war meant changes to habit and some inconvenience, for the firefighters of the great cities, it meant much more. It meant a daily battle, month after month, against stupendous odds. As war approached, auxiliary firefighters were recruited. In London, 28,000 joined to support the 2,500 regular officers and men. And when the Blitz fell on the city and it endured 57 continuous nights of bombing, many of those climbing the ladders were fighting fires for the first time.
It is not enough that the civil defense services should work like heroes and heroines. It is not enough to praise ambulance, rescue and firefighting services. There are thousands of people who have not as yet been blitzed. And if there are any who feel that they can add something to the national effort, let them reflect on these pictures.
In London alone, more than 300 firefighters were killed.
Britannia is a woman. At home, she's in the front line. In this hour of need, she is ready to share burdens, old and new.
Britain's fire service was organised on a national basis in 1941. And by 1943 numbered 70,000 women in its ranks. Heroes with grimy faces, they were dubbed. Before this reality overtook daily life, there had been planning and practice. Large-scale air raid drills were regular events around the world in the 1930s, from Europe to Australia, from the factory floor to the schoolyard.
At times, ARP training seems to be making only slow headway, but take a look at this. Employees of a radio factory at Southend show how evacuation can be carried out efficiently and smoothly at short notice. 2,000 of them file out into the shelters which have been constructed by the company in 5 acres of adjacent ground. Each member of the staff knows his or her allotted entrance and place, and within 7 minutes the whole evacuation is completed. Darts lend just that British touch to a grim rehearsal.
Paris started rehearsing blackouts and practicing air raid and gas attack drills in 1936. A year later than Paris, the Germans carried out their first rehearsals in Berlin in 1937.
How amazingly efficient Germany is with her anti-air raid precautions. Sirens sound the alarm in Berlin for the first rehearsal, and within a few moments the streets are cleared, everybody flocking to the famous system of underground shelters. Then realistic war is let loose overhead, 7,000 air raid shelters for 4 million people. Think of it. Everything is staged with realistic effect, whilst we ourselves display our usual apathy, merely hoping for the best.
If most people were expected to put on their masks, turn off their lights, and go down to the shelters, others were trained to put on their tin hats and boiler suits and go out and about in the name of public safety. Volunteer civilian forces were assembled to protect homes and communities from the hazards of war and risk posed by forgetting that there was a war on.
Volunteers are coming forward, equipment is being provided, and Britain is at last awakening to the drastic need for air raid preparedness.
At the start of the war in Britain, the civilian organisation responsible for helping the community in the event of an aerial bombardment or gas attack was Air Raid Precautions, or ARP, the civilian front line. And air raid wardens, drawn from the ranks as diverse as can be imagined. From teenage girls to old soldiers, were its most visible and valuable troops. In 1939, the Luftschutz, German civil defence, already had 850,000 functional members. By the time Britain went to war, 1.5 million people had signed up with the ARP, and many others had joined other auxiliary defence units.
When I joined up when I was only 17, I was stationed in London on a barrage balloon site. And you used to let the balloon out from 200 feet to 1,000 feet to stop the Germans dive bombing us. And then we used to have to check the gas that we put in, and they used to say, who'll go? And they'd put a rope around your waist, and you're climbing through the vent, and call out if you could smell gas, and they used to pull you out. The first one we were on was at Lynham, and it was in a children's school. We had the balloon in the playground, and so when the wind blew, it used to yaw over. And there were wires all the way round the school, and you had to slowly put it up and stop it so that it didn't yaw. And then it'd get up, and we used to get into trouble because if it yawed too much, you used to take the chimney pots off and the tiles off the roof, and then they used to kick up a big fuss about it. Say, we don't want you, clear off.
It was generally believed, including by the defence experts, that Germany would try to deliver a knockout blow as soon as Britain declared war. So when the first air raid siren sounded within 25 minutes of Chamberlain's announcement, it found a country where houses and other buildings had been prepared for blackouts. Paris heard its sirens. They had been regularly tested for several years and still are, 2 days after the declaration. Like the sirens of London, it proved to be a false alarm. These events were to be in part a rehearsal for horrors that the population was to be spared. There were to be no gas attacks, no bombs fell on Paris, and no invasion landed on British shores. But bombs fell on British and German cities, where the people for several years lived very different lives.
We lived in the city centre, and we often used to get the air raid alarms because the aircraft used to come over Bath to get to Bristol. And so although the sirens used to go and the air alarm, very rarely did we take cover. And on the day in question when the Blitz on Bath started, the air raid alarm went at about, if I remember, about 11 o'clock. And my father and I got up and walked out into the street. And one of the things we saw was up in the hills above the city, the aircraft flares dropping over the city. And that's when my dad realised that we were going to be the target, which we were.
At the height of the Blitz, without waiting for the siren, people left their homes and trooped to the shelter, or left their houses and went to their garden refuges, and some took their chances in the basement.
It's one of those strange things in Bath. You have a basement apartment here, but your garden is 2 floors down. And so we weren't worried. And after the first all clear, I went up to go to see what damage had been caused. And that's when I met one of my school friends who came riding by on his bicycle with a steel helmet and a gas mask. And he was a messenger boy. And that's when I decided to be a messenger boy. I had put my age on. You had to be 14. I was only 12.
Wherever you were during the raid, you were unlikely to escape the sound of it. And those who lived through the bombing became experts on judging how far, how close, and even what type of munition was hitting their district.
It was completely deafening. And we could tell the difference between the engines of the aeroplanes going over, because we were what was called Bomb Alley, where the Germans used to come and go over the top of us. And you could tell the difference between the Junkers and the Dorniers by their engines. And if I say the sky was black, I'm not exaggerating. It was black, with the big bombers going over and darting in between with the Spitfires.
That's what it was like. And life went on. Wherever civilian populations came under attack, life went on. It didn't go on unchanged, of course. Adjustments were made. But it went on.
And one time we were coming back and there was a Messerschmitt or a fighter, German fighter, and we had to lie in the gutter until he went past. And John went underneath, I went next, and Mummy was on top until he went away. This was how it was. You didn't think anything of it.
Going out in pitch-black nights was hazardous. Vehicles had their lights masked, and wardens could issue fines to households letting out light, to cars not fitted with a headlight shield, or even to people not shielding a hand torch in the street.
The houses had all blinds and shutters and different things because you couldn't show any lights. The street lighting went out altogether or very dim, and the buses had to dim all their lights.
Ignorance of the regulations was no excuse, because information and propaganda sections everywhere made sure to educate the population about the rules and restrictions.
Royal Air Force observers tell us that the blackout in Britain at night time is pretty good. But in the morning it is not so good, although it's every bit as important. Mrs. Twerp has been up some time, and she's rather apt to open the front door with the light on. And by the time the lodger gets up and starts shaving by the uncurtained bathroom window, the house begins to look like election night on Broadway. Mr. and Mrs. Twerp are particularly liable to forget the back of the house. A light from the kitchen can be seen in the sky just as easily as one in the front.
Particularly at the beginning of the war, the blackout was an incredibly important sort of feature of government publicity. But it's not that successful. So there was a very famous campaign where people were encouraged to wear white in the blackout so that they'd be more easily seen. And this doesn't seem to have had much of an effect on civilian behaviour at all. So the blackout was always a quite complicated part of the Ministry of Information's work.
The effect of the blackout was important in keeping the target dark. But once bombs and searchlights lit up the night, the blackout could be forgotten. As the air war progressed, Pathfinder aircraft dropped incendiaries that turned night into day.
This is an incendiary bomb. It takes fire on impact and may burn 15 minutes. It will ignite anything in its vicinity. The stirrup hand pump is the best to deal with both bomb and fire.
We had incendiary bombs hit our house and smashed all the tiles on the roof and ricocheted off. And it went in the garden next to our house and started a fire. But half the American army had been in the house entertaining themselves, and they jumped in with buckets of water and throwing buckets of water all over the fire and put it out, just as well that the house was being used as it was.
Buckets of water and buckets of sand were kept handy, and the windows of homes and shops were taped up, not against a direct hit, but against the blast of anything that fell nearby. And newspapers, magazines and government leaflets gave advice on the best materials to use and the best methods to employ.
The biggest danger was flying glass, and so we had shutters that we put up on all the windows, and they also acted as a blackout, because you couldn't even have a chink of light showing.
While such measures might reduce damage, they could not save a building from being flattened by a direct hit. So in every city under attack, the safe place was the shelter. And shelters came in many shapes and guises.
And now let's see what protection the pepper pot type of shelter affords. 40 tons of good Birmingham wall went into that spectacle, and the bulletproof, splinter-proof, shock-proof shelters have stood the test.
In London, there was an obvious underground candidate for shelters. And the nightly trek down onto the platform of the local underground train station, the Tube, became an enduring memory for many Londoners. They were never comfortable, safe enough, but able to hear the raid, and wonder whether their house was hit, and to wonder whether that might mean the end of the beloved family pet. Pets were not allowed in the shelters, and pet lovers had their dogs and cats killed by the thousands, rather than leave them to face the nightmare of the air raid on their own. Those who dared, or those who had a basement or cellar that they hoped would be safe, remained in their homes. Those whose homes offered no safe refuge turned to their gardens.
That mound to the left of the picture is an Anderson steel shelter, in case you don't recognize it. Now clear the stage and... The house is demolished, but what about the shelter? Intact, say the experts, proving that it's splinter-proof and blast-proof. So you can all erect the Anderson steel shelters in your gardens with the confidence of this test at Shoebury-Ness behind you.
Everyone with the space in their backyard was encouraged to build a shelter. And the most common design was the Anderson shelter, which the government provided free to all households who earned less than £250 a year. And those with a higher income were charged £7.
We had an Anderson shelter, and my dad had fixed it up very comfortably. We had cooking facilities and always a good supply of clean water. And that, only thing is, it didn't have a dunny.
Made from 6 curved sheets bolted together at the top, with corrugated steel plates at either end, and measuring 1.95 metres by 1.35 metres, the shelter, half buried in the ground, with earth heaped on top, could accommodate 6 people, and people were strongly encouraged to use them.
It really started getting down to the nitty-gritty, you know, where we started bombing. We used to come home from work, and we'd lucky to snatch a bit of tea. Then we'd go down the Anderson shelter from anything to about 5, 6 o'clock at night, and you wouldn't come out till 7 o'clock next morning till the raid had finished and the all clear had gone.
The lucky people these days are those who possess Anderson steel shelters. Make use of them and don't leave them until you really know it's all clear.
The Andersons' potential was trumpeted with stories of enterprise and innovation. Plans were devised and shared for ways to maximise a space, putting in bunks and storage to allow everyone a bed to lay, despite the small size.
You made it deep enough, then erected the steel on it. Now you took down there what furniture you had. In our case, it was just deck chairs, a couple of deck chairs for the parents, and that was it.
The virtues of the Anderson shelter were often loudly proclaimed in the media.
And now another word or two in praise of the Anderson steel shelter. And you'll have noticed the point of this picture already. A bomb has fallen, a house has collapsed, but the Anderson shelter, a few yards away, protected its occupants. All were safe.
For 3 years I was put to bed at night in the air raid shelter. There was just no point in going in the house. So, about 7 o'clock I'd be put to bed in the air raid shelter, which was hard in the summer because it'd still be daylight and the chickens would still be up, but I had to go to bed because I was little.
It was hard to disguise the main drawback of the Anderson shelter, which was that nobody liked them. They were small, and a family was cramped and uncomfortable, cold, and more than likely to let in rain and puddle up with groundwater. As the war went on, people became habituated, as people do, to the new norm, and the shelters fell into disrepair and into disuse. The Anderson shelter's lack of comfort and warmth made dragging oneself out of a warm bed when the siren went off an unattractive proposition, and many survivors of the Blitz admit to thinking that if the Germans were going to get them, they'd rather be dry and warm. The problems with the Anderson shelter, as well as their unsuitability for those without backyards, meant that other options were developed.
Once the Blitz started, my father bought what was called a Morrison shelter, which was like a big steel table, and it had wire sides to keep all the stuff off. And we lived in there in the evenings, and we used to go in, Mummy and John and me, because my father was at work, and we had a thermos of tea and a thermos of soup and some sandwiches, and we had the cat and the cat's potty and our potty, and that's where we slept.
The Morrison shelter was a metal cage with a wooden frame which could be installed inside the house. Marketed as being space efficient, it was able to double as a kitchen table. The safety benefits of the Morrison could not have extended to protection from a direct hit, or even perilously close hit. It was in the companionable environment of communal shelters and the many types of public shelters, trench and street, cellar and crypt, that the legends of sing-songs and cheeky banter, indomitable spirit, and wartime romances flourished. Basement shelters were often below significant buildings. Hotels were a popular option. In Germany, uniquely, they built high-rise shelters, the Hochbunkers and Winkelturm, where space was scarce. In Britain, deep basement shelters were most popular, and the ones frequently associated with the community of strangers muddling through together are the station platforms of the London Underground. Most were basic spaces, but they were favoured because they were dry and safe.
Everything possible has been done to make them really comfortable. There are canteens to keep the shelterers supplied with hot drinks and light refreshments. Sick bays are provided as well, and there's always a doctor in attendance to deal with minor complaints or casualties. Lighting and air conditioning are of special importance, and all installations are handled from a central control.
Tube stations had initially been ruled out as shelters because of safety concerns over trains passing through spaces with crowds of people sleeping in them. But as the Blitz progressed, people ignored the prohibition and authorities eased it, and tube stations became the most popular shelters. At the height of the Blitz, almost 180,000 people were spending every night on a station platform. That part of living in the shadow of war is remembered and remade in drama and story as an innocence of dart games, dancing to gramophone records, drinking beer, brewing tea, playing cards. And sometimes it was like that. But the night-long knees up wasn't the usual experience. The night was spent wondering what sights would greet you when you walked back up into the daylight after the all clear. And none of the places used to shelter large numbers of people were fit for purpose. They had no bathrooms and were usually overcrowded. Leaflets were produced by the Ministry of Home Security titled, "When you go to the shelter, what you should know, what you should do." Above the tunnels, air raid wardens enforced the blackout. Below ground, shelter wardens enforced a set of rules designed to ensure that everyone stayed healthy. And to the extent that such a thing is possible, avoid getting on each other's nerves.
Inside, it's noisy. You're supposed to be quiet, but they were noisy. We had the big things on the door, big blankets dropped down, keep out any light or noise.
It was this bringing together of large numbers into cramped spaces that triggered a further concern. A concern famously remembered in the official slogan, "Loose lips sink ships."
From the beginning of the war, the Ministry of Information used surveys and used observation around the country to try and work out how morale was, what issues were coming up, what people were complaining about, things like that. And they did worry that careless talk, scaremongering, talking about defeat, that kind of thing was happening. That's what encouraged the first efforts for a careless talk campaign.
This was an incredibly important threat during the early part of the war. It was seen to be an important threat by the government. So from October 1939 onwards, the Ministry of Information attempts to launch these anti-gossip campaigns.
He said to her, "Let's go to Coomwood for a picnic on Saturday, Mary." She said to him,
"We can't do that, silly. It's closed to the public. There's a dump of our new mine detectors there."
The consequence was, "They're right overhead now, Santa. Looks like the wood's gonna get it." And the world said,
"That's your fault, Mary."
By the time you get towards May 1940, when the Silent Column campaign is born, the threat seems to be even more pronounced because Britain is suddenly facing the prospect of invasion.
It was a real concern of the government, most definitely, yes. They called it fifth column. You were a fifth column person if you told lies or even the truth to the Germans.
So far, the Blitz on London is a failure, reported American journalist Ernie Pyle. London is no more knocked out than a man who smashes a finger is dead.
All the world that is still free marvels at the composure and fortitude with which the citizens of London are facing and surmounting the great ordeal to which they are subjected, the end of which, or the severity of which, cannot yet be foreseen.
Air raids and mass bombings were intended to degrade and demoralise civilian populations, and that did not happen. The British population, broadly speaking, did remain defiant and stoical and even humorous in those circumstances.
Life carried on very much so. For many nights after the bombing, people went out into the country to sleep in case the raiders came back. But after a couple of weeks, of course, it was realised that they weren't, and that sort of faded into obscurity.
What did not, perhaps, fade was the feeling of loss and sadness belonging to the parents sheltering without their children. On Friday, September the 1st, 2 days before war was declared, Britain evacuated children from the great cities to what it hoped would be the safety of the countryside.
And the government want to persuade more parents to send their children into safer districts. A registration form has been distributed to all parents, and it should be filled up now. The children will be well cared for by friends in the reception areas.
There was an official evacuation scheme in September 1939, and this had a huge amount of publicity surrounding it. Most of this had been planned before the war, though, so it was the responsibility of the Ministry of Health, working with voluntary organisations like the Women's Voluntary Service.
This had already happened in the First World War. Most people had remembered that time and automatically thought that evacuation was the right thing to do.
Pregnant women, new mothers, those with disabilities and the elderly were also moved out of the cities at the start of September. And evacuation that broke up families became one of the enduring images of life in the shadow of war. Those of large groups of children standing on railway platforms, suitcases grasped in tiny hands, gas masks hanging around necks, and a luggage tag tied to their coats as identification.
And here, another consoling thought, most of the children themselves have gone off cheerfully enough. For them, fortunately, the whole procedure seems to hold no terrors and is even regarded as just another holiday.
The initial phase of evacuation, getting the children packed and ready, went smoothly because everyone bought that it was for their own good. The task proved tricky once the more than 1 million children made it to the stations and it was time to get them on trains. Some children failed to arrive at the meeting places, possibly because of their flat-out refusal to leave or a reluctance of the parents to let them go once the day arrived. This caused problems with numbers and the finely tuned timetables essential for the movement of so many people.
The efficiency with which these schemes of evacuation have been planned and executed is a consoling thought and a matter of congratulation to the organizers.
The trains and buses needed to leave on time, or it would all fall apart. So children were marched onto any train that was waiting, and they didn't all end up where they were meant to. Once on the trains, the children were packed into overcrowded carriages that carried them out of the city. Many from poor homes, leaving the city for the first time. Some got motion sickness. Others were confused and upset by the time they got off the train.
We went to a little Georgian town in Berkshire called Hungerford, and we lived in a house which was in the main street of the town, and the shop was a dry salters, which meant they sold kerosene and salt and things like that. And there was Mummy and John and me, and there was Mr. and Mrs. Glover who owned the house, and they had what they called Edward's desiccated soup, which was a little square like that, which was meant to do soup for 4 people. Well, she made it do soup for 8 people, and from that day to this, I don't like consommé.
Within days of the outbreak, the French government had evacuated 30,000 children, more than 85% of the school population, out of Paris. And the British government had organised for nearly 1.5 million children to farewell their parents at train and bus stations and other rallying points. Efforts were made to keep siblings together, but in the inevitable confusion and rush, that often failed, and very young children, used to the crowded life of a poor inner-city home, were strangers in a completely alien environment, some completely alone, and some lucky ones evacuated along with family members.
It seems extraordinary now, but I just think of my poor mother and all the other mothers, you know. I mean, we were evacuated together because my mother wouldn't let us go to be officially evacuated, and so we went as a family. But just imagine when you sent your little kids off on the train, you didn't know where they were going. They could go to nice people or nasty people. We were lucky. We only had Mrs. Glover and her Edward's desiccated soup.
Evacuation brought about the mixed blessings of unprecedented social mixing. Town met country. Middle class met lower class. Poverty met comfort.
So they face a new life in a new world. And separated as most of them are from their parents, it's still thumbs up.
In reception areas, the children were inspected and selected by country families or single people who had been determined by local authorities to have the space to host an evacuee or two. This process was traumatic for some of the children, being picked over by strangers, an experience often compared in memoirs as akin to a market with potential hosts searching for some child to their liking. Once chosen, a new set of challenges and unknowns met the evacuees. Strange houses, new families, different foods and unfamiliar rules.
Those who were evacuated to the countryside, which a lot of them were,
which I eventually was. Part of my time was spent in a home of people who took in evacuees, and they treated us like their own sons and daughters, which was wonderful. And I found the son of the family was very friendly with me, and I used to go around with him and play with him and learn to ride a bike and all that sort of thing that I needed to know as a young boy. I was very, very thankful. But I suppose I had a relief from being in London and the bombing and all the rest of it. It was a terrible life there.
The air raid season is now upon us, and the folly of keeping children in a big city likely to be blitzed hardly needs stressing.
The stories at the time captured optimism and adventure. Perhaps they reflected the experience of many. Perhaps they hoped to encourage those who were less happy. Enid Blyton's adventuring quintet, the Famous Five, with their jolly rural adventures, made their first appearance in 1942. And the book, The Magic Bedknob, that would find fame 30 years later as Disney's Bedknobs and Broomsticks, came out in 1943. But by no means did all the children enjoy the separation, and not all, in later years, were to recall the experience in quite such positive ways. It all seemed unreal, recalled one, like a horrible dream, as all of us stumbled along while our mothers stood lining the opposite pavement, some waving, but some of them crying.
In the end, a lot of people brought their children back quite quickly. They shortly after realised that perhaps it wasn't going to be as bad as they thought, or they just couldn't deal with the long-term potential that their children might be away for a long time.
As the war progresses, there are attempts to get people to send their children back to the countryside, because a lot of them have returned. And in this second wave of evacuation, organisations like the Ministry of Information are involved. The success, though, it's difficult to say. In both occasions, children do return, and not all children are sent out.
It may seem to us now, with a much better understanding of the effects of separation, to have been an insensitive act. But the step to relocate an estimated 1/4 to 1/3 of the population was not taken lightly. Nor was its possible pain overlooked. Perhaps what surprises us in the public pronouncements was the feeling that, because they were children, it was not possible to explain to them what was happening.
How is it possible for them to understand that the routine of their daily lives has been shattered by one man hundreds of miles away in a country they have never seen? It is indeed a strange experience for these thousands of children, as well as a great responsibility for those who will be caring for them during these dark days.
Such meetings must, inevitably, include some collisions, and there were inevitable problems. These were children, and emotional problems were certain. Many of these host adults were very firmly set in their ways, and in the world of the war years, knew far less about the life in other parts of the country than might their equivalents today. And there were practical consequences in moving a large group of mainly poor children from their crowded city homes, with its miasma of germs and diseases, into the country, and everything from serious diseases to head lice and the common cold travelled with them. Those who stuck out the war in the country took memories rather than sicknesses back with them. And they found the cities that they had left to be changed, but not the people. Area bombing failed to destroy civilian morale. But the belief that destruction from the air could defeat a country persisted. And Hitler, placing more and more hope in his wonder weapons, invested vast resources and faith in the flying bombs, the V1 and V2, that attacked England in the final stages of the war.
I was a messenger boy come office boy, and I ran across London with messages and the company's bits and pieces of whatever information they wanted to send to other different branches. And so I was running across London for the last year of the war, dodging the bombs, and well, that was my life during the war.
So life went on. Not the same as life in times of peace, but a sort of normal life, fueled by the will to keep going. Bombs separated children from their parents and forced civilians into shelters. The shadow of war tested resilience and morale. And people everywhere responded with a dogged, pragmatic determination until the shadow was lifted.
Children of all ages have been evacuated, and here are some intimate scenes of movie-terms children in the country. The punctilious regard which these little mites have shown for their hostess's property is touching in the extreme. Food. These healthy youngsters are punctual to a fault at mealtimes. Observe the old world courtesy with which they offer the kind lady the first helping. No wonder they're so whelped little dears. And even when things go wrong a bit, not a vulgar word nor a rude action, just a quiet, efficient demonstration that the youth of Britain is prepared for all emergencies.